So the stories we read as children define us. Okay, no, I'm going to have to ditch the hat. I look like I'm going to maim one of my friends with an excavator. The stories we read as children define us. They teach us about the world through characters that might not be exactly like ourselves, but that are relatable nonetheless. Stories like Lord of the Rings, The Chronicles of Narnia, they give us a honed moral compass. They allow us to agree on what is right and what isn't within the world. I want you to keep this in mind while we discuss the subject of today's video, because I believe that Ayn Rand might be one of the most influential people of not only the 20th but also the 21st century. Alyssa Rosenbaum was born in St. Petersburg on the 2nd of February 1905, into an imperial Russia that was slowly losing its grip on power. There's a whole video about it if you want to see more. In her early years, Alyssa loved literature, and her favourite book was the 1914 novel The Mysterious Valley. In the book, a group of British colonisers have gone over to India to help bring civilised culture to the tribes. As they do so, a large portion of the soldiers within the British Army would go missing. It's assumed that this is due to tiger attacks. But as the book progresses, we find out that the British officers, instead of dying, have actually set up their own society in a hidden valley, independent of the Indian tribes. At the age of 16, in 1921, Lenin's new economic policy would nationalise her father's pharmacy, leaving a bitter taste in Alyssa's mouth and sowing the seeds for her hatred of communism. She majored in history at Petrograd State University before studying screenwriting. In the same year, 1925, Stalin would rise to power, forcing Alyssa to leave Russia for America due to fears for her safety as a Jewish woman. The 1924 Johnson-Reed Act prevented many immigrants in America getting jobs, especially those of Jewish heritage, meaning that Alyssa had to change her name to Ayn Rand. Rand moved to Hollywood, where she did have some success in the silent film industry. However, the rise of talkies meant that her thick Russian accent put her out of work, forcing her to pursue her writing career. In 1937, Rand would write Anthem, a book about a society in which the whole idea of the individual has been removed. The words I and you don't even exist anymore, and have been replaced with we and they. Authoritarian rule has pushed humanity back into a technological dark age. The story follows a young scientist conducting secretive research before his work is discovered and he's forced to run off into the woods with the woman he loves. The book couldn't be a more explicit critique of communism and reads a lot like Orwell's 1984. In 1943, Rand would write The Fountainhead, her first real success in the literary world. In the book, an architect Howard Rourke struggles against the conformist establishment, who try to remove any individualism from his modern designs. The book ends with Rourke blowing up one of his buildings because it wasn't built to his specification and was compromised to fit in with everything else. The book also contains many sexual encounters of Rourke's, which essentially amass to assault. Rand writes Rourke as a driven idealist who won't let anything get in the way of his vision, his success, or his happiness. In Rand's view, Rourke's the perfect man. His unwavering devotion to his work, despite what everyone else thinks, is something we should all apparently aspire to. Contrasting the communist society of Anthem, in 1957 Rand would release Atlas Shrugged, a book which was by far her most successful work, and one that many world figures have said is their favourite. And when I say favourite, I don't just mean like favourite of Rand's work, I mean like their favourite book that they've ever read. Atlas Shrugged depicts a very capitalist society, a world in which the working class has suffered a cognitive decline, meaning they're not even capable of very basic tasks on their own. This leaves the corporate elites to be the ones that have to drive the economy and keep the whole world afloat. The book depicts the ideas of social Darwinism, the idea that the elite are successful because of their innate talent or intelligence, and that the working class and the less well-off are so because of something that they've done. In other words,
you need to, as a man, adopt the mindset that absolutely everything that happens to you is completely and utterly your fault, whether it's good or bad.
The industrial elite, or men of the mind, are again limited in their ability to innovate by overbearing government regulation and social welfare programs that, in the book, make the working class even dumber and lazier. The protagonist eventually discovers that all the missing men have abandoned the lower classes to set up their own society in a hidden valley in Colorado. I wonder where she got that idea from. Atlas Shrugged is a shameless promotion of the most selfish form of capitalism. It allows you to believe that success at any cost is not only something that's admirable, but something that everyone should strive towards. But most dangerously, Rand's book teaches the reader that if you are successful and powerful, it's because of your own determination and intelligence alone. So now we get to play a game called Who's Read Rand? And I'll give you a clue. The answer is the alt-right and a surprising amount of other figureheads. So it's impossible to say exactly how much someone influences society as a whole, and I don't want to try and quantify that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to list off the people that I've been able to find that explicitly praised Rand's work publicly in the research I was doing for about 20 minutes, if that. An early proponent of Rand's work was Alan Greenspan, who in 1987 was promoted to US central banker by Reagan. Greenspan believed that a free market was the only way to have a productive and efficient society, and that government regulation only hindered development. And his boss, Ronald Reagan, also referred to himself as an admirer of Rand. David Nolan, one of the founders of the Libertarian Party, literally said that without Rand's work, the libertarian movement wouldn't exist. While their views didn't completely align, Everyone's favourite Margaret Thatcher did share Rand's thoughts on the free market, privatisation of business and small government. The Fountainhead is one of 3 books that Trump has ever claimed to enjoy, and while we're talking about him, his CIA director Mike Pompeo said that Rand's work really had an impact on him. And Rand's work was not only read by the corporate elite. A 1991 survey put Atlas Shrugged after the Bible as the 2nd most influential book of all time. Which again begs the question, why have I never heard of this woman before? And don't think just because it's 2023 and you're in Britain, you're safe either. Ex-Chancellor Sajid Javid claims to have read the Fountainhead twice a year, every year, for the whole of his adult life. And don't worry guys, if you, like Javid, have read the book to death and you want something fresh, you're in luck. The hot-headed Dominic Raab and professional sour-faced bitch Priti Patel have joined forces to write the Fountainhead ripoff, Britannia Unchained, Global Lessons for Growth and Prosperity. God, even the title makes you want to shave your head and put on a gravy-stained England football shirt from 2005. And it's not just politicians too. Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, said that Atlas Shrugged was one of Jobs' guides in life. And Travis Kalanick, the former CEO and founder of Uber, literally had the Fountainhead cover as his Twitter profile picture. Outside of writing, Rand was a very vocal philosopher and a proponent of her own ideology of objectivism. In her own words, objectivism is the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute. According to objectivism, acting in your own self-interest is not only encouraged, but is the only way to truly achieve what you can in life. When speaking about supporting her artistic husband, Frank O'Connor, Rand said this.
Because you see, I am in love with him selfishly. It is to my own interest to help him if he ever needed it. I would not call that a sacrifice because I take selfish pleasure in it.
Rand also just straight up believed that altruism is evil and there's no such thing as society, just a group of individuals all coexisting. Rand was also strongly against government regulation and social welfare programs, describing it as wasting money on people that have already failed to succeed in their own right. However, a question asked at the end of this interview, for me anyway, really does show the naivety of Rand's worldview.
What in the Ayn Rand civil context would be appropriate societal measures to accommodate the ungifted?
Their own parents, and a chance to give their parents to earn money. If, however, their parents are poor and cannot assume it, it's a big, heavy burden, then you can appeal to private charity.
Rand's idea of this perfect, selfish world still relies on people filling the roles that we see filled today. She claims that private charity will help the less fortunate, but then advocates for an economic system where there's no benefit in people running private charities. Her society only works if it breaks from the fundamental principles on which it's based, or more accurately, at least a certain percentage of the population does. In other words, if you're in a room full of nice people and you're the one dickhead, you can probably get away with a lot of stuff, but if everyone's a dickhead, then nothing's going to happen. In 2023, these ideas, while callous, don't really seem too far-fetched, but that is because Rand was such a vocal proponent of them at the time. She received a lot of criticism for her ideas, but by being the first person to say something, you can make the second person to say it look a lot more sane. As the seeds of objectivism grew into a tree of selfish ideology, it gave birth to a generation of businessmen and politicians who thought of themselves as characters in Atlas Shrugged. When I was researching this though, there was just one thing that kept confusing me that I just couldn't get my head around. Most people who have extreme or alternative worldviews do so because it benefits them in some way. Whether it's the super rich lobbying for lower tax rates, or MPs voting for higher rates of pay for people in government, there's an obvious goal in mind. For a while though, I just couldn't see how this benefited Rand in any way. Objectivism states that everyone's success is their own responsibility, and nothing within objectivism really explicitly benefits Rand in any way. None of this made sense until I saw a clip that both sent shivers down my spine and made everything click all in one go.
The field agents of the army whose head or commander-in-chief is the philosopher. The philosopher, the man who defines the basic fundamental ideas of a culture, is the man who determines history. And professional intellectuals are all those whose professions deal with the humanities.
Rand's goal was never wealth. It wasn't even popularity. She wanted to, on a fundamental level, change how we think about society, how we treat those that are different to us, and how we consider our place within the world. In her own words, Rand wanted to be the woman who would determine history. And in that, she succeeded.